of this Easter in the Psalm series, we see the fact that God is personal. We looked at this through Luke chapter 24, following the story of Jesus appearing to the men on the road to Emmaus. Those two men go and explain to the disciples exactly what they experienced, what they saw, and how Jesus appeared to them. Right? But they were in a locked room because they all feared that they would face persecution similar to what Jesus faced. And then all of a sudden, Jesus appears out of nowhere. And he says to them, "Peace be with you." Well, this is important because this wasn't just a typical greeting that everyone gave to each other at that point in time when they saw one another. Jesus is actually the literal bringer of peace to them because they were in great fear, right? Scripture says in particular that they were startled and frightened. Not just because of the persecution they could face, but because all of a sudden Jesus, or what they thought was a ghost at one point in time, all of a sudden just appeared. But how did Jesus show them that he actually was who he said he was, right? He helped them experience peace in the midst of their frightening experience, in the midst of their fear. What he didn't do is he didn't try to tell them why they shouldn't fear. Hey, you are fearful right now, you shouldn't be fearful. He didn't do that. He didn't try to tell them what he was going to do next. No, he said, look at my hands and look at my feet. Meaning, look at the scars of where I was crucified. He says, touch me, feel me, understand that I am real. Right? He even ate a piece of fish in their presence, showing them that he was in fact Jesus, the Son of God, who died and rose again as he predicted and prophesied that he would. And after the disciples really started recognizing that this actually was Jesus right in front of them, who had risen from the grave as he said he would, they started being more open to what he had to say. Because Jesus then started explaining that everything that he did, everything in his life and the actions that he took were for the purpose of fulfilling the prophecies in the Old Testament, specifically citing the law of Moses, the prophets, and then also the Psalm. And so as he starts doing this, then what we see in Scripture when we look at this passage in all of the Gospels is that there was a period of 40 days that took place that Jesus was with the disciples. And the disciples were experiencing the risen Jesus for that time and understanding more about who he was. They better understood the Scriptures is what Luke chapter 24 tells us, that Jesus really was connecting the dots of the gospel for these disciples. And then he tells them what to do next. First is to wait until that they have been clothed with power from on high, is what he says. And then, once they're clothed with that power, they can go and do what God calls them to do, which is Matthew 28 and the Great Commission, and sharing among all of the nations about the risen Jesus. And so as we think about this passage and how that applies to our walk with the Lord and being able to commune with God, and that God is really a personal God, we can see that we are designed to be in a personal relationship with him, not in a distant one. But what does that mean? As we see the disciples, they don't start growing in their understanding of Jesus just because of the resurrection. They grow in their understanding of Jesus because of the time that they spent with him and experiencing the risen Jesus, the resurrected Jesus. And the same goes for you and me. That God desires so much to be in a relationship with us. Psalm 34 verse 8 says it best, and David is writing this. He says, to taste and to see that the Lord is good. Our experience with Jesus requires us to step out and to take a leap of faith, if you will, to taste and see, to experience God. And when we do experience God, we will see that he has our best interest at heart, that he has a plan for our lives, that it would be best for us to follow. We will be more fulfilled than anything ever, and we'd be able to bless others more than we could ever imagine. And this is the exact same challenge that Jesus gave to his disciples. And just a couple questions for you to think about and process with the group is, first, in what ways do you consistently experience God in your own life? Not just to know about God, but to genuinely experience a relationship with him as if he's sitting right next to you. And question number 2, how has your experience with God continued to strengthen your faith in Him.